and welcome to Book It. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. Joining us today is best-selling author Kate White, who is out with her 19th novel, I Came Back for You. It's a twisty suspense with an ending that I, for one, did not see coming. Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Carol Anne.
It's great to see you. So to get started, tell us a little bit about the plot of the book, how it unfolds, but of course, without giving it away.
Well, in a nutshell, it's about a woman named Bree who learns that the serial killer thought to have murdered her daughter 8 years before has made a deathbed confession that, yes, he killed 4 college-aged women, but her daughter, Melanie, wasn't one of them. She then realizes she has to know the truth or she's never going to be able to get back to dealing with her grief. So she sets out with her ex-husband, no less, to go back to the college town where the daughter was murdered and try to figure out who really did it.
So I mentioned that this is your 19th suspense novel. What draws you so much to the genre as a writer?
I don't know. I know, like maybe you too, I love Nancy Drew books when I was little.
Yeah. I can still see that. Was it The Hidden Staircase?
Of course, every one of them.
Yeah.
But even as a little girl, this sounds so bizarre, but the Daily News used to have a section called The Justice Story. And we got it upstate New York, and I would read these stories and just be fascinated by them. And even, all sorts of crime. And I knew all through my life, even though I went into another field, that I wanted to write suspense fiction. And I felt weird about it then. But now that I have friends like Lee Child and Karen Slaughter, you realize, oh no, there's a whole bunch of weird people out there.
So throughout the book, Kate, I kept changing my mind about who the killer was. Do you hope that readers can't guess? Or do you drop enough clues that you hope they can guess?
Well, just from research and also reading mail from readers that they don't mind if they don't guess because they like the thrill of trying to guess, and they like it when they do guess. And so what I try to do is leave certain clues so I'm not pulling a rabbit out of the hat, that I'm being authentic and not cheating them. But for me, it's really fun to try to surprise them with the killer, because you want it to be both to make sense, but actually be a surprise too. And actually what really helped me when I was first writing, there was a woman who I knew whose girlfriend was one of the top female magicians in the country. And I took her out for a drink and asked her to teach me misdirection a little bit. And I used some of that in trying to misdirect the reader. So I'm not good at magic tricks, but I learned enough from her that I think I do some pretty good misdirection.
That's really interesting. I think you do too. Now, I didn't really realize there was a word exactly for it, but there you go.
Yeah, it's called misdirection in thriller and mystery writing as well.
So the book is set in 2 places that are actually personally significant to you. Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Well, I set the first 6 or 7 chapters in Uruguay, where my husband and I live in the winter. We've lived there since I decided to leave my day job. And we just love it. It's a really progressive country, South America. And my agent had said to me, would you ever consider setting a book in Uruguay? But I didn't think it would be interesting to do the whole book there. But as I wanted Bree to have to come from a very far place, to be more at risk as she seeks the truth. So I thought, hey, what about this as the opportunity to use Uruguay? And then I set the rest of the book on this college campus where the daughter was murdered. And I had been wondering, where should I do it? And then I was asked to give my college commencement address at Union College a couple of years ago, and I was up there, I'm like, okay, wait, why not here?
Yeah.
And then I thought later, well, they probably regret having invited me to give the commencement address. But while I was there, as soon as I realized this is where it's going to happen, I took a lot of pictures. And Union is a wonderful, very old college from the 1700s, so it has a great campus.
Yeah.
It was actually in the way we were. So it was a perfect setting for me to work with.
So you mentioned that the main character, Bree, is grappling with the death of her daughter, who was murdered. You're a mom, and I had to imagine, I had this thought, like, was that hard to write about, even in a fictional way?
Oh, yeah. In fact, my daughter reads my books, but I did not tell her about this one. She has no idea it came out. But I think, for me, I lost two of my younger brothers in recent
Kate,
years.
I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a kind of, I had that prolonged grief that sometimes people have.
Yeah.
And this was a great way for me to try to deal with some of it, to write about grief and research grief. And I always made it about something other than a daughter, because that was the only way I could deal with it. I didn't want to ever think about losing a child.
Yeah, I can understand that, of course. Switching gears a bit, I wanted to talk about your career because it's so interesting. You spent 14 years as the editor-in-chief of Cosmo magazine, which had to be a demanding but super fun job.
It was the most fun job in the world. It was incredibly demanding, but as the boss, I got to leave at 5:30 every day and work after my kids went to bed. So it was a good job in many ways for a working mom. But as much as I loved it, and there was the clothing allowance and the cars and everything, and working for a great company, the Hearst Corporation, I could see, because I was privy to not only our numbers, but all the industry numbers, that the magazine business was collapsing, that it was just going south and was never going to recover because of the internet. So I had started writing books while I was at Cosmo because I didn't want to give up the dream of writing suspense fiction. But then I realized, wow, this is going to be my plan B, or as we were talking about earlier, the side hustle that helps me. And I know they were surprised when I said that I wanted to leave, but I just felt, if I want to really do this and make it my full-time job, I better do it now. So I left about 13 years ago.
But Kate, going back into that time period, you actually wrote 8 novels while you were in that job. And you had kids at home, right?
Yeah.
So that is some serious multitasking.
It was a bit of burning the candle at both ends, but I would get up, take my kids to school, get to Cosmo because the kids had to be dropped off by 8:30, and no one on my staff ever got into 9:30.
Right.
So I had an hour every day, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, I got up before the kids did and wrote for a couple of hours. And I think, the thing you discover about writing, if you really try to have a method to it and not bite off more than you can chew. In the beginning, I didn't write too long. The pages added up. And it turned out to be a technique that I try to use today too. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Just figure out what's going to be your slice of the salami, how big it's going to be that you can handle, and go for that.
And just going back to the magazines for a minute, you sort of ended up in that world because you won a contest in college, right?
Yeah, I really wanted to be in media somehow when I was in college, and it was before the internet, so I didn't know, how do I get from point A to point B? And my college, because I was in the first co-ed class, asked me, would I like to be their entry into the Glamour magazine Top 10 College Woman contest, which was so incredible. And we had a big anniversary get together, the bunch of us, 2 years ago. It was wonderful. They took us to Europe.
And you ended up on the cover?
And I ended up on the cover, which my brothers call trick photography. But I like to think I photograph well. You be the judge.
Okay.
But anyway, that kind of chose a lane for me.
Yes.
Because at the time I realized, well, you can't, I wrote poetry as a kid too. You have to pick a lane. But that lane became magazines for me, and I loved it, starting at Glamour and moving up and eventually Cosmo. But then I realized I really want to reinvent. And I think a lot of us have felt that with the pandemic. And I just say, go for it, figure out the process you need to use and make the leap.
In addition to the fiction, you've written a couple of career books as well. And one of the main themes in those is the importance of being gutsy, especially for women.
Right.
Can you explain what you mean by that, by gutsy?
Well, one of the things I learned over life, and at first you're afraid to do this, is rule breaking almost always pays off. Even for the Glamour cover, they brought us into this big fashion closet and they showed us all these wonderful clothes. And I remember the fashion director saying, we're showing a lot of sage this year and burnt sienna. But I went right for this yellow turtleneck with a matching orange, yellow, and green skirt because I thought, I've seen enough magazine covers to know they don't have burnt sienna or sage green on them. They're bright. And after I got picked for the cover, and whenever I see myself in that yellow turtleneck to this day, I think, you didn't follow the rules. And I think it's really great if you just sometimes step back and say, let me think out of the box here, let me offer an idea that they haven't thought of before, as long as it makes sense for them and not just you. And rule breaking has just so paid off for me over the years.
What are the traps that you think women fall into in terms of not being gutsy?
Well, for my generation, it was growing up and being told, don't jump into the puddle with your party shoes on. And certainly for women today, it's different. But I think women still hold back sometimes. Like, we hear it's important to ask. And yet, even talking to my daughter sometimes, she might say to me, is it better to wait for them to bring it up because they know I want it? No, you always want to be the one asking, and they respect it. And again, you don't want to make it about you, and that's sometimes a mistake that women make. They'll say, my rent just went up. I know I have staffers that say that. You've got to make it about, I love it here, I love working for you. Boss is like a little bit of ass kissing, I've learned as a former boss. And I just would like to know that there's more opportunity for me. I'd like this, and when they offer you a certain salary and a job discussion, negotiation, it's always important to say, that's fabulous, I'm so excited, can't wait to work here, but I was hoping for this amount.
Right.
They almost always have more in their pocket. They're waiting for you to negotiate.
It's good advice. So I want to go back to your process a little bit. You touched on it a bit, but 19 suspense novels, so is it easier now?
In many ways, it's easier because once you've done 90,000 words, you realize, well, I did it once, I can probably do it again. But you're always looking for different plots. There's only so many times in 19 books the cop can be the killer. So once you've done that, and I won't tell you which one that is, you've got to find somebody else.
Right.
I find certain techniques for me. I'm a plotter rather than a pantser. They say certain thriller writers go by the seat of their pants.
Oh my gosh, that's good. A plotter versus a pantser.
But I felt pantser to me sounded like someone who pulled wedgies, and I thought, I'm never going to be called a pantser no matter what.
Okay, so you're a plotter.
I'm a plotter, but not strict. Not strict.
But do you have any particular then habits or rituals around the actual process? Like you have to sit in this place or start at a certain time of day or anything like that? For
me, I need to be, I found out I was an early bird in terms of creative.
Me too.
But I also like being a night owl, and I had to really rethink it for me. I need to be at my desk by 8:30 or so, which isn't too early, but I have to be there then. I need it very, very quiet.
Yeah.
With a scented candle because I need something to keep me there. And then I plot it out loosely, and I keep a spiral notebook where I then plot out 4 chapters at a time. But I always know who the killer is, what the final twist is going to be, and a few components.
So yeah, I read that about you, Kate, that you always know the killer before you start. So do you have the end first then?
Yes, I do, because I want to be able to lay the clues down so I'm not gypping the reader, but I also want to do that misdirection. And if you don't know it to the end, like a lot of pantsers, I wonder, well, how did they do it? And sometimes I can tell a pantser book because I think that wasn't done very well.
Well, you definitely got me with your misdirection. Just a last question for you, Kate. You've had a lot of success as an author, and you're someone who changed careers. So what is one piece of advice you would give to aspiring writers?
One thing that I would give that I've thought a lot about because of I Came Back for You is to avoid saying the words, yeah, but. When aspiring writers come to me and ask me about the business, and I base it also on running Cosmo Books, a certain amount of knowledge base, I'll often hear them say, yeah, but, as if their ideas in a whole different category. And when I was trying to come up with an idea during this time frame, my wonderful agent said to me, have you ever thought about writing about someone not 34 years old but older? And I heard myself saying, yeah, but, and wow, I went home that night and I thought, I'm doing exactly what I advise people not to do. So I wrote about a 54-year-old, someone somewhat closer to my age. And the book's been a really big success. And I think it's partly because I found a new voice writing about someone closer to my age.
Yeah.
And so just when you hear yourself saying, yeah, but to an idea someone tosses out, step back and say, flip it and say, yeah, but what if I did do that? What would happen maybe?
All right, that is great advice. Again, for life as well. In
Absolutely.
general, not just for writing,
I just have to remember to follow it sometimes.
Okay. Well, you and me both. All right, thank you so much, Kate, for all your time. It was terrific to see you.
Thanks, Carol Anne.
Really appreciate it. All right, now let's head to Isabel Ortiz in our podcast studio for Breaking Books.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabel Ortiz and welcome to Breaking Books. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by two guests, Suzanne and Oeya Garcia, to discuss their initiative, Books and Bodegas, combining the love of reading and the neighborhood bodega to increase accessibility to reading in the Bronx. Hi Suzanne, hi Zoya, thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, Isabel. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I am so excited to talk about books and bodegas, combining two of my favorite things. So I want to know, because some people wouldn't necessarily put books and bodegas together. So how did the idea for this organization really come about?
Yeah, I was thinking of some initiatives for the beginning of the last school year, 25-26.
Okay.
And I started feeling like, okay, whatever I do here is not going to be enough. Got to do more, you know. It was also partly influenced, in large part influenced by the fact that our local bodega was very involved in our community, knew our kids, would tell them to get to school in time, this kind of thing. You know, the bodega in New York is, very community oriented.
The bodega is the pillar of the community. And when you're checking in with that first bodega, talking about how the community has been responding to the books on the shelves, what was some of the feedback that you got?
It was really fun to actually interact with the community, especially because, we're teaching there. So, now, when Suzanne and I go to the store, everyone says hi. So there's that, right? So it feels like this initiative has made us more part of the community. And then I think I also appreciate that, for me, the children that go in, so, the teenagers that aren't in the school that we teach at, also talk to me when I'm setting up books and stuff, or ask me questions. And it's just really nice. See people donate too is really fun. Whenever I'm restacking the one in Bay Plaza, I'll see some books and I'm like, oh, this bodega doesn't even know they have classics.
Oh, yeah.
What? Y'all have Judy Moody in here? It's so up. You know what I mean? So, but that's that's donations. Someone else saw this book and was like, let me get, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I'm curious, because you're making basically mini libraries next to the chip aisle in the bodega. But does it operate like a typical library? Are people expected to sign out the books? Are they even expected to bring the books back?
So we asked folks to respond through the QR code about what book that they're borrowing that particular day. We do remind them that we would like them to return it after they've read it, to share in that joy of sharing with the community. Does that always happen? It doesn't. We know the counts, how many were there the week prior, how many are there the week next. But that doesn't mean that we can check who's brought a book back. We want them to enjoy the books. We want them to feel like they can do it in privacy. We don't necessarily want to collect so many pieces of data, but we do need a little bit in order to know that we're impactful.
And I know that the Bronx has been considered a book desert. What exactly is a book desert, and how is Books and Bodegas filling that gap?
I feel like book deserts, to me, when I think of that, I think of a community where people who invest in education do not consider the area worth the investment.
Okay.
So the fact that we have a system where, as Suzanne even said, we don't really even mind if you don't have a book to bring in or a book to donate. It doesn't matter. The point is that you read. And so hopefully, and as we're seeing too with the response, the goal is that people in the Bronx and kids in the Bronx and whoever who wants to read, right, feels like there are people who, I don't need money from you so that you can read. I don't need consistency from you. I don't need you to even have like a good memory enough to remember to bring the book back in 2 weeks. Like, you just deserve to read a book, you know?
My hope is that people are seeing the books on our shelves and then like developing a curiosity. Like, okay, I need a bigger selection now, you know? And we need those bookstores in the Bronx. We need people to buy the books and donate the books, you know? But it's also like a filter. It doesn't replace, what we do doesn't replace a bookstore. It doesn't replace a library. It can. It could never. But the idea, I think, is that it will filter, you know, people to places where they can, you know, find more and explore more, especially if they're developing a thirst, you know, for the books that they're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Especially now because summer is here. How do you see Books and Bodegas really filling that gap for students when they're not in school and they can't find a book when they're out of school?
I mean, they're there. They're there for the taking, you know. We actually opened our 10th store recently. We're very excited about that. Thank you so much. You know, they're there, and we hope to expand too, because, you know, when we're teaching, a lot of times, like, we're drained, you know,
of course,
we're tired. But now in the summer, we're hopefully looking for, you know, to expand to different stores.
I'm sure starting a non-for-profit in itself comes with challenges, but convincing bodega owners to give up valuable space. What was that conversation like when you go into the bodegas and you're trying to convince some of the owners to have Books and Bodegas in their stores?
We had a couple of false starts in the beginning, you know, folks that maybe we felt like, you know, we would put the books in and then like the books would be like hidden like in the back, or, you know, there would be too many gone. You know, we got the sense of what the flow kind of is like and how many books are in and out, and you know, we would see like so many books gone that we would be like, okay, something's like maybe askew here. So we had those disappointments in the beginning. It's like if someone's with it, they're with it, and if they're not, the convincing is going to be a very hard thing to do. There were some stores we would make like multiple visits, and we'd buy a water and we'd buy a like wrap, you know, we'd buy like chips or whatever, and then, you know, we'd try to like you know, slide it in there, and it's not if it's not going to go, it's not going to go. If someone's not community minded, and there's a multiple reasons why not.
Well, I'm so glad that Books and Bodegas is growing. If people want to sign up as volunteers, or maybe somebody who owns a bodega is watching this and they want to contribute and have a shelf in their store, where can they reach you, or is there a form that they could get in contact with you guys?
Recently, it's been through Suzanne. So if you go on the Books and Bodegas Instagram, like, and you say you want to be a volunteer, then you'd be directed to me.
If a store owner is interested, our email is stores@booksxbodegas.org. But ultimately, if they go to our website, if they go to our Instagram, they can reach us there, and we can filter it out. We'll make sure it gets to where it's going.
All right, so they can find you online and on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Great. It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you both today and learning more about Books and Bodegas.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's from the Bronx and beyond.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, now let's head back to Carol Anne in the studio.
Thank you, Isabel. Great stuff as always. You know, during my interview with suspense writer Kate White, I got to thinking about my summer beach reads because I love a thriller in my beach bag. You know, that and the sunscreen, I'm good to go. Anything you love to read over the summer?
I gotta say, I love a good romance. Just something playful and light by the beach with a cold drink. That's my perfect summer.
All right, well, that sounds pretty good too.
All right, and now why are thrillers your favorite go-to beach read?
I think because they're entertaining, and I also feel like if I get kind of distracted or something and I'm on vacation, I can put it down and come back to it pretty easily. I mean, you and I both read a lot of different kinds of books over the course of a year, but you know, I gotta say, I really like a thriller over the summer.
Well, maybe I have to pick up a thriller next time I'm on the beach.
Give it a try, or maybe you and I have to do a beach day, have a little field trip. What do you say?
I liked how that sounds, a book it field trip.
Okay, all right, you're on. All right, thanks again, Isabel. Now it's time for Uncensored. As always, author and critic Linda Stasi has plenty to say about what she's reading.
I'm so excited to tell you my big news. I'm going to win the Pulitzer Prize. No, not for the novel that came out this year, but for the one I plan to write. How do I know I'll win it for something I haven't even started? Because I finally figured out what a novel needs to floor the Pulitzer judges. No punctuation, run-on sentences, intellectual pretension, and characters as deep as a sheet of typing paper. But mostly, it's just using a new and different way to eliminate punctuation. Take this year's winner, Angel Down by Daniel Kraus. His conceit is so extreme, I'm calling it writer's megalomania. It's like the strippers sing in Gypsy, you gotta get a gimmick. Kraus's gimmick is he has written a book that's made up of one, count 'em, one sentence. Each new paragraph starts with lowercase and, which I wish was uppercase and. Stop the torture, please. Angel Down is 304 pages of endless gore about a bunch of banged-up soldiers in World War I who rescue a wounded angel. In addition to the whole book being written in one sentence, we get endless blood, guts, and gore, which is meant to be, I don't know, I think religious vision or something. I think it should have won the Pulitzer Pretension Prize. But the good news? I figured out a great writer's conceit for my own, sure-to-be Pulitzer Prize winner. 400 completely blank pages with a period at the end. Winner! Seeking relief from, quote, literature, I found refuge in a book so light it was hard to keep it from floating away. It's titled The Heir Apparent by Rebecca Armitage. It's a princess book, but not one of those awful sexist, I want to be a princess books. This one's about a princess who doesn't want to be a princess. When Princess Lexi was younger, a horrible tragedy occurred, which her father, the future King of England, covered up. The book jumps back and forth between several time periods, but I'll start with the present. Now in her 20s and doing her medical residency in Australia, far from the British throne, Lexi is as happy as a boxing kangaroo. Of course, things can't stay this way, and Lexi's father, the heir, and Lexi's twin brother, an heir spare, are both killed in a skiing accident. That leaves Lexi as the surviving heir to the throne. So, does she give up medicine for monarchy? If so, the next in line is her creepy uncle, who would make a mediocre, not to mention conniving king. Hey, not that the current royalty in real life has been full of Albert Einsteins and Mother Teresas, but still, will the princess turn down the throne to turn back to the Aussie farmer she secretly loves? Such a dilemma, but such a relief to read a book with actual periods. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stasi.
That wraps up another chapter for us. Thanks so much for being here. A quick reminder to check us out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. We'll see you next time on Book It. To support your favorite programming here at CUNY TV, please consider donating at tv.cuny.edu/donate.